Well, hello, our fellow friends, our fellow neighbors, and our fellow shining stars. Our next trolley stop is here, and our next trolley stop is now. Welcome back to another all-new episode of PR from the Heart's Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. To be precise, we have reached episode number 25. That is the 25th trolley stop here at the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, here at PR from the Heart. My name is John Masiulionis with PR from the Heart, and of course, joined as always, each and every Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. You know him and you love him. He is Little Forrest, and he is entering what seems like the terrible twos in dog years. If something isn't nailed down here in the PR from the Heart studios, he will go after it, whether it be a pen or a paper towel. So he is super excited to join us because it is the start of spring. Raise your hand if you are excited for the start of spring and the beginning of April, which is just around the corner. We're just, of course, first things first, celebrating the beginning of the end of March before we get to the beginning of April. But as always, on the Neighborly Reviews Bookcasts, in addition to Little Forrest, joining me is my co-host. You remember him and you love him as the beloved Mr. McFeely on the long-running children's television program, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, which just celebrated its 55th anniversary on public broadcasting. The trolley, of course, travels each and every month through the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast from San Diego across the country to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where we will be reconnecting in person, and more details on that momentarily. David Newell joining me as always, now for episode number 25 of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. David, you spent some time here in Southern California. How are your travels? How is the start of your spring going?
Well, the start of the spring was fine in the travel, but when I got to Los Angeles, I was surprised with all the rain that California is having.
Yes.
But I guess that means that there'll be a lot of green this year in California with all the rain. So that's at least the best part of the rain, turning things green.
It's actually interesting because I saw a statistic on how San Diego and Los Angeles have several more inches of rain to start off 2023 than Seattle. And when you think of cities that rain across the country, you're thinking Seattle's like on the list. And both San Diego and Los Angeles had, I believe, 3 to 4 more inches of rain, not just, a couple little centimeters. We're talking like a noticeable difference. So this is the start of the 2023 with the rain is slightly delaying this little guy's potty training, but everything happens in its perfect time. And we are super excited because for our March bookcast, the theme of today's episode, this week's episode, this month's episode, depending upon when you're watching, episode number 25 of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, is helping parents to raise conscious kids. So our children are very curious. When they have their emotions and their feelings, they want to be able to express themselves. There's a lot of wonder in their eyes, in their minds, and in their hearts. And thanks to 2 of our fellow neighbors here at the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, we now have 2 new resources of care to be able to help little ones not only connect to their emotions and their feelings, but also the wonderful world of nature, and answering especially those curious questions about reproduction. If you're a parent, you probably heard the question from your little one, where do babies come from? And you might not necessarily know how to respond or where to begin, but leave it to us, leave it to David and I, and to Little Forrest here at episode number 25 of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. We've got you covered. But before we begin, just a few brief housekeeping notes. Most importantly, if these messages that we are already communicating on episode number 25 of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast are inspiring you, they're lifting your spirits. If anything, if you're tuning into the Bookcast for the first time and you're a little curious yourself and you're saying, I wonder what magic and miracles await me from tuning in to David and to John and to Little Forrest, we encourage you to subscribe to PR from the Heart's official YouTube channel and to share this very special trolley stop that you are now enjoying. For those who are new to our neighborhood here at the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, David and I, we take the time to deliver the newest heartfelt reviews from the newest children's books from the shining stars in the kidlit community right here at PR from the Heart. And we really do our part to be able to provide these resources of care, these brand new children's books, to let parents, caregivers, grandparents, educators know that they're available. You don't have to take this parenting and educational journey with the little ones in your life alone. It's important that you know that there's those trusted resources by your side. And of course, each and every month at the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, we are proud to pledge our support to Reading is Fundamental Pittsburgh. Now, Reading is Fundamental Pittsburgh is the Pittsburgh chapter of the national non-for-profit literacy organization that provides children's books and developmental resources to children that come from low-income families all across the country. So again, Reading is Fundamental Pittsburgh is the Pittsburgh chapter of the national non-for-profit that is Reading is Fundamental. Did you know alone that last year in 2022, over 100,000 children's books were given to over 23,000 children in need? So again, we are proud to pledge our support each and every month to Reading is Fundamental Pittsburgh. We encourage you, if you feel guided to do so, to do the very same. rifpittsburgh.org/donate. We've included the link below in the description below. As we like to say here at the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, no donation is too large, no donation is too small, and especially the gift of literacy, helping children to be able to not only learn how to read, but to cultivate and continue to connect with the love and joy of reading. David, this is one of my favorite times of the year because, you know, little ones across the country are seeing more daylight, more sunshine. And one of the best feelings is when little ones can enjoy a children's book outside in the great outdoors, and they can spend time with mom, dad, brother, sister, grandma, grandpa as well too. So as always, we're proud to pledge our support for Reading is Fundamental Pittsburgh, because there's a lot of kids in Pittsburgh that definitely utilize the resources of Reading is Fundamental Pittsburgh. Not everyone has the opportunities to purchase brand new children's books and to afford these resources of care. So RIF Pittsburgh does its part to be able to help as they're guided to do so, and really making a very big difference in the lives of many in the Steel City, of course, the home of Mr. Rogers' neighborhood.
So we are going to start out with Which Would You Choose? Is that correct?
That is correct. So the trolley is going to be racking up a little bit of miles here. As always, it does each and every month. So the trolley, of course, has begun to travel from San Diego to Pittsburgh, and then we head to the beautiful state of Virginia. I believe it is called the Commonwealth State, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
And life transformation coach, illumination guide, and children's author Julie Deanne has just released her brand new children's book entitled Which Would You Choose? And one of the things, David, when I had the opportunities to see this book for the first time, there's a beautiful sloth on the cover, right? So, you know, for example, if you're a parent, if you're an educator, especially if you're a little one, you see this sloth who looks so happy and so peaceful and is in what many refer to as the lotus position. And I really love this book, and we're going to be diving into it momentarily. But, you know, for many of us, we can see life as scary and challenging and intimidating, but life really can be an adventure. In many respects, you can choose your own adventure. And one of the great things that I really love about Julie and her work, I remember growing up as a kid, they had those choose your own adventure books. And this is not the traditional children's picture book. It's not a matter of, you know, here's the primary character and here's the story arc and here's the beginning and here's the middle, here's the end. Children are able to really create their own adventure along the way, while really doing their part to be able to learn how to connect even more so with their emotions and their feelings. Before we officially kick off our neighborly review of Which Would You Choose, this goes back to almost a common theme of every episode on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, where Fred would talk about the importance of being with your emotions and your feelings, and that there was really nothing wrong with it. It was a healthy and important part of childhood for children to learn how to understand how they feel, and Julie's really doing her part in her own way to be able to do just that.
So with that said, should we dive into the book, as you say?
Little Forrest is excited. Let us dive inside the pages of Julie Deanne's Which Would You Choose?
Well, the book begins with a thank you from Julie to her daughter. I think her daughter was an inspiration for the children's guide. In turn, Julie hopes that the book is inspiring and helpful to children. But there's a preface that Julie writes that when we connect with our higher being, our consciousness, we are able to live our lives from a place of inspiration and love. And that sort of sets the theme of the book. And she hopes the book is a guide for children to recognize the innate power they have that resides deep within the heart center, connecting us to our higher being, as she says, and all that is life of the universe. That's directly from her preface. Julie believes these following comments. These all factor into the book. And the first one is, we are not slaves to our emotions. That's one thought she deals with. And we're not victims of our feelings, not prisoners of our thoughts, not at the mercy of how we feel, but rather, as you were saying a little earlier, we get to choose how we feel. We have the power to change our emotional state at any given moment. And I think what I'll do is give some examples of those stories in the book. But before that, Which Would You Choose gives these examples, and you can actually choose the subject of the story can actually choose what they choose to feel within that situation, if that makes sense. Julie says something very interesting, that she feels that children typically grow up to battle or contain emotions and not know that they can choose how they feel. That's an important statement, I think. They can choose how they feel, and the book gives examples of that through stories. Well, now there are two options on each page of the book. A situation a child can relate to emotionally. A child, and even adults, this book would be good for adults, could take one way and feel good about the situation, and take another way and feel bad about the situation. The information in the preface is just summarizing. I tried to summarize just what I said. That's all in the preface of the book. And there's tips on how to use the book. The pictures are used to show the child how a choice of a specific action can associate with a specific feeling. So, as you mentioned earlier, there is a sloth that is portrayed in each one of these stories. The sloth is the same in each story, but the sloth has a different name, if that makes sense. And I guess we'll see that as we go through the book. Well, in one of the first stories, Jordan, who's the sloth-like creature, represents each person in each story. But the first story, Jordan is invited to go rock climbing, and Jordan has been to rock climbing before, but he seemed to be nervous and worried about rock climbing. And his friends said, "Oh, don't worry, there are people there to instruct and guide us, and don't feel a bit hesitant." But he was still hesitant. He was unsure about something so new and unfamiliar. And a lot of people have this feeling. A lot of children have this feeling. So Jordan was scared and excited, but Jordan said yes, but still feeling a mixture of emotions. And as the day approached, Jordan thought how exciting it would be, a real venture, how free it would be to get high up and conquer the fear of heights. Plus, it would be a good story that Jordan could tell his friends later that he went rock climbing. So that's one choice. He could say yes. And trying something new would give him courage and confidence that could help him throughout his life. And after that first brave step of rock climbing, Jordan took many more climbing adventures. He gained the confidence to try many new adventures. So did that make sense? Do you see the contrast there? His first option would be to say yes and worry about it, or he could have said no and remained home. In fact, he didn't remain home in the second choice, and he was thinking, wonder how the rock climb is going. I'd like to, he didn't make that choice to go. So there is the choice that Jordan, our little sloth friend, had to say yes or to say no. And there's a lesson in each one. Does that make sense to you?
100%. And to kind of tunnel a little bit further, David, is that, this particular story, along with some of the other passages, and you're going to be sharing at least a couple other passages in the stories, is that I really love this book. One of the many reasons why I love this book is because children can also be introduced to many of these real life situations. Most of these, if not all of these passages that you will enjoy through the pages of Which Would You Choose, these are things that children experience during the course of their lives, and even adults experience at a certain point in time in their lives. And if a child hasn't had the opportunities to experience one of these things yet, they can do their part to be able to connect with what that experience looks like, and maybe do their part to kind of avoid some unnecessary suffering or pain in the process. But as you said, like there's two different paths. You can follow the path of love and, trusting in yourself, believing yourself, self-confidence. So that's kind of one path, or the path of what would be, allowing the feelings of being down or depressed or having fear or judgment. There's different kinds of emotions, but they're really on two kinds of spectrums. And again, Julie shares these in a beautiful way throughout all of the passages within the course of her book.
So Jordan had two choices in the rock climbing day. He had the choice of going on the rock climbing, and he would gain confidence in trying many new things. But the choice for Jordan was followed by another choice. On the day of rock climbing adventure, Jordan said no. But then that's when he started to wonder about, how's the rock climbing going? And later that week, he overheard some of his friends talking about how exciting rock climbing was and what an adventure it was. And then he felt disappointed he didn't say yes. But, he was never invited to another rock climbing adventure. And Jordan seemed to say no to anything that was difficult, or to try new things. And as I said before, in his turn, his hesitation to say yes often resulted in Jordan not being invited to group activities. And that left him feeling lonely. And it was also not boring doing new things, but keep doing the same familiar things. That was boring. And he wondered, maybe, and this gave him pause in a way in the second choice, maybe it is time for a change. And along with each story in the book, there is the question, what would you choose? Does Jordan choose to say yes and have this wonderful rock climbing experience? Or does he choose to be somewhat hesitant and fearful and say no and never been invited again? But it did give him pause to think, maybe it's time for a change. So that was his power of the changes in your hands. And that's the story of Jordan. That's one of the stories that opened the book. There are other ones too, but did you have any other comments about that story?
One of the other things that this is really helping kids to remember, I feel, and even adults as well too, because you mentioned about there's oftentimes as adults we can just do the same things every day, even if it's as simple as eating the same kind of food or driving the same way to work. And after a while, that can get really boring. And I really feel that, a lot of times when there's something new that comes into our lives, we can easily be scared. We can say, well, it might not turn out right. I might mess things up and whatnot. But, I really love the title of this particular passage, and Julie really defines it perfectly when she refers to it as scary but exciting opportunity. So really, this is an invitation, David. I think this is an invitation to children and to parents, and to just really any sort of adult, even if you don't have a little one in your life. You can say yes to life. If life is bringing in this something that, like, for example, little Forrest, right? I wanted to have a dog for a long period of time, and there was a part of me that was maybe scared and that would say, well, I might mess up and maybe I'm not going to be a good dog dad, or what if little Forrest doesn't love me, right? So I could have easily went down that thought bubble and went down that path, and I said, no, I'm going to say yes to this opportunity. I'm going to say yes to being a dog dad, and I'm going to be a great dog dad. And yes, there's been some interesting adventures along the way with little Forrest, and there's been some frustration here and there, but things have a way of working themselves out in the process. So, and that's just the first passage. There's multiple passages in the story. Did you want to share another one or two passages?
Yes. Well, the first story of Jordan is a wonderful example how children, or maybe adults, could determine how they feel emotionally. Jordan had that choice, and there are about 10 stories in the book, and each one a wonderful example of a person's power to change their emotional state. There's not enough time to explain every story, but here's one that I sort of identified with. It was a swimming pool. And in this story, Alex, who's also portrayed by our friend the sloth, is alone at the swimming pool waiting for his friends to arrive. And no one is at the pool except Alex and a lifeguard. Well, he decided he would practice some of his underwater flips while he's waiting for his friend to arrive. But he didn't seem to be doing them right. And why is it so difficult today, Alex thought. And he started to criticize himself, like, you just can't do it right, and you're so dumb you can't get it right. And then thoughts of, oh, I'm just going to give up. You'll never get these things right. All of this was going through his mind as he was waiting for his friends to arrive at the pool, where his friends were still not there. And we got out of the pool, and he sat on the lounge chair. And where were the other kids? He thought, well, he was miserable. And he never noticed what a beautiful day it was. The sun was shining, and they said the butterflies were on the flower. But all he could think of and all he had were negative thoughts and emotions. And by the time the other kids arrived, he was so upset that nothing seemed to matter to him. And he felt, well, I'm going to go. I've wasted this whole day. Then he realized, stop this thinking. I choose today that I can do it. He tried his flips again, and he succeeded. And he even taught another kid. They finally arrived how to do an underwater flip. And Alex had an amazing day, and he was not the victim of his feelings. He chose to change his thinking. Now that's another story, and alongside these two stories, the phrase "what would you choose" is repeated after every story. I think that's a good example, because I had similar experiences waiting for my friends at the pool and thinking, aren't they coming? Why? I told them I'd be here at 3:00 or whatever time it was, and the negative thoughts. But then I remember, okay, I'm going to practice the dive. I'm going to dive. And I was hesitant to do it because you never know when you dive into the water for the first time, what's going to happen. So I identified with that story, but it was really a change of thinking. And I think that's a wonderful lesson. That's a very clear lesson, I think. And there are lessons like this throughout the book. Should we go on to another one? Another one. I have one more that I can remember.
Yeah, feel free, David. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, there is a story about Kim, and she overcame her fearful thoughts about being in a school play. Now, I'm sure Kim is not alone in those fearful thoughts. There are a lot of people who don't like to speak in front of groups or perform, and I certainly can understand that. And she interfered. Those thoughts interfered with her trying something new and being fearful of speaking in public. But she thought of how much fun it would be to perform in a play, and she recognized her fear, and that recognition seemed to help her performing in front of people. Now, I don't think it's magical. I don't think it's not magical that you can think a thought and all of a sudden it's magical and you can do anything you want to. It's not that way. I think it's a process of thinking in a very positive way. Nothing comes by magic. It comes from inside, and I think it's a practice you have to do to bring out your positive thoughts and your "I can do that" thoughts, and not let the fearful emotions take over. And I think that's what is being said in each story in the book, don't you? That basic thought that you have that innate emotion and use it.
You have the abilities to decide what it is that you want to give your attention to. So, I mean, all thoughts, we obviously can't control the thoughts that come through our mind.
No.
But it's a matter of, for example, as you said, like there's many little ones that are trying out for, I know that my former high school I saw actually did their rendition of The Wizard of Oz. So my old high school back in Buffalo. And even, teenagers are very and when you're a teenager, you really want to fit in. You don't want to be left out, right? So it's very easy to say, am I good enough for this part? Is the person who's making the decisions, are they going to like me? Am I going to mess up a line, during the dress rehearsal or during the, when it's time for the big show, that kind of thing. And then you can also just sit back and say, as you said, no, I'm not going to choose to believe that. I'm not going to allow those thoughts to run the show. I've come this far. I know that by believing in myself, I know that I can do it. So again, it goes back to the phrase, it's the invitation. It's the invitation to children, to preteens, to teens, to adults. What is it that they choose to believe? And then based on that, if you believe that you're going to believe in yourself, you're going to have that standing ovation by the time that the end of the play or the musical runs around. Utilizing an example.
It's training yourself in that positive process.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said earlier, maybe the first time it's not quite as successful, and the second time is better than the third time. It gets into a routine of it's really positive thinking. And it takes work, and there's also it does take work.
Us as adults, we can still fall into this rabbit hole of, am I going to believe in, for example, let's say you're going to be a father for the first time or a mom for the first time, and you can easily have all of those thoughts that say, I'm going to be a horrible parent, and maybe growing up, I really didn't have the overall best childhood, so will my little one have a really good childhood? And it's a matter of, again, really deciding what it is that you want to give your thoughts and your emotions to, and really choose to believe at the end of the day.
There is one more example. Do you think we can do one more example?
Yes.
I jotted one down, and this one was, let me see who this one is. I jotted it down. Oh, it was Drew. That's the boy's name. Drew was always picked last when sports or some sort of competition was coming. And again, Drew is portrayed by our little sloth friend throughout the book. He resented it, and he remained silent. So when he was picked last, he was on the team, but he didn't really participate. He sort of just went about, just sort of lackadaisically going about being on the team. Well, somebody has to be last. He thought that. I'm picked last all the time, and here's the thinking starting to change, but somebody has to be last. A change in his thinking came about. He changed his thinking, and then he started giving out congratulations to other team members for their success in the game. Drew's thinking helped him with a sunny attitude, and it helped him with the team spirit, and the kids appreciated Drew's positive attitude. So it's not saying that all of a sudden Drew was picked first. He may have still not been picked first, but maybe not last. But being picked last helped him understand that not everybody is first. Somebody has to be last. And that little sentence, I think, started to change his thinking into a positive way. Now, I hope did that seem clear to you in that little story? That's what I got out of it.
Yes, and it's interesting how this particular passage brought up a very sad memory even for me growing up as a child. I remember when I was in grammar school, we would have recess. So right after we had lunch, we would go outside. And the school that I attended, we had it was attached to a church. So we had the whole parking lot, and the parking lot was our playground. So we would play touch football, and we would have, I think there was like about 8 guys in my class, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I wasn't the jock of the bunch, so to speak, and oftentimes I was picked last. And that's, again, there's so many relatable experiences in this story that, again, even adults can connect to. And so
yes,
I share this, David, because, I took the time to go back to my, 10-year-old self, 9-year-old self, 11-year-old self. It was around that age. And I'm able to express more empathy and more compassion and more understanding that maybe I didn't give myself at that particular point in time. So this book actually has a little bit of a healing component as well, too, because I can just imagine, again, if there's adults that are sharing this, parents that are sharing this story with their little ones, and they could remember, oh, hey, I remember when I was in high school and I tried out for the school play and I didn't believe in myself. Or, I, like John, when it came to, being picked for baseball, just using another sport for an example, was picked last. So I can really connect to the feeling and the understanding. But I love how Julie titles this passage, Save the Best for Last. So, I always go back to that beloved Vanessa Williams song. How she always sung how she saved the best for last. So again, the great news with this story is that you get to choose. You get to choose things one way, or you get to choose things the other way. It's interesting because one of the quotes that I really began connecting to probably about a little over 10 years ago, I think, is the phrase by Albert Einstein, and he calls it, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And so, forever who is tuning into an episode number 25 of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, again, whether you are a parent of a little one, whether you're an educator of many students, whether you're just doing your part to reparent your own child, it's important to know that you can understand the power of your emotions and connect with your feelings. You don't have to stuff them down in a drawer in any way, shape, or form. And also, Julie's book has received many wonderful endorsements. On the back of the book, there's some wonderful real-time feedback from different authors, speakers, educators. There's so much good that comes from this book, David. And again, we could probably just spend an eternity talking about all of the other redeeming stories and passages, but I think just the best way to sum this up is that this book helps children on different levels. If you simply want to introduce your children to the topic of bullying, for example, there's a passage on bullying. If let's say your little one may not necessarily comprehend or understand the story in terms of the full thing from beginning to end, but just loves the sloth illustrations. Julie's illustrator Tamar has done such a beautiful job showing this sloth character expressing himself, herself in different ways, moving through the different sorts of emotions. But just at the end of the day, we're learning the fact that we can choose to think differently. I think one of the last things to mention is that was a multi-time New York Times best-selling author. I believe he was referred to as either the father of motivation or the godfather of motivation or something along the lines of that, but the beloved Dr. Wayne Dyer. And he wrote a book called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. And in many respects, even if it's just, it involves practice. You take the time to believe more in yourself and that there's more good that's coming into your life. You're going to be seeing that in your external reality. So again, kids are able to learn really how to not only cope with their emotions, but to be able to see how their emotions are, that they're really just forms of that. It's a part of us that just wants to connect with us on a deeper, more meaningful level, if that makes sense.
Well, that's right. I was thinking as you were speaking, the teachers could use this book again for, it's probably elementary, older children, but it'd be interesting if the students could read the book and maybe write an essay about it. Maybe do one of the stories, duplicate a similar story to the swimming pool story or the whatever. And it would be interesting to see what they come up with, what a class would come up with, and what options they may have or maybe already do. And the options could very well lead many students to, if they learn about the options, they have a choice of options. It can lead many students to a happy and productive life. I think there's a lot in this book that's so beneficial to children and adults, and I think maybe in some ways adults would get even more out of it. But above everything, you have to practice, and all the time. It's not a simple magical process. It doesn't change overnight.
Agreed.
It may take weeks and months and years, but you've got to start somewhere.
Yes, and this also goes back to, and I know that Fred said this and he sung this, but you've got to do it.
That's right.
He also said that as well too. And again, I think just the last thing to share before we shift into our second and final book as part of the March edition of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast is that one of the great things about children's books, including Julie's brand new children's book, Which Would You Choose, is that you can line up 10 different children and the story is open to interpretation.
Yes.
So each child, each adult who enjoys Which Would You Choose will have a different response. So again, for example, the passage about saving the best for last, I automatically connected to that memory when I was in, third, fourth, fifth grade, and how I was picked last for a touch football. But it allowed me to go back to that moment and say, okay, well, you know what? That's okay. Like, you know what? I still have the opportunities to spend time with my friends. I still have the opportunities to go outside. I have the opportunities to have fun. These are three things that maybe I didn't necessarily see in the moment because I wasn't necessarily fully in tune with that side of me as I was still developing emotionally at that point. But again, this book has got so many great qualities in terms of the illustrations from Tamar, the emotional depth and connectivity. The book itself is meant for more older kinds of children, but really children of all ages can really connect to this in one way, shape, or form, which is fantastic. And not to mention, David, little Forrest gives 2 paws up for Which Would You Choose. if you really want to have the opportunities to learn even more about Which Would You Choose, I have the opportunities to sit down with Julie Deanne and talk about this wonderful story and how it came to be as part of episode number 172 of PR from the Heart's Children's Book Spotlight series. So you can stay connected via our official YouTube channel at PR from the Heart, or check out PR from the Heart's official website, prfromtheheart.com, and enjoy my sit-down conversation with Julie. And of course, you can pledge your support for Julie by purchasing your copy of Which Would You Choose. It is now available. You can head on over to her official website, juliedeanneauthor.com. If Amazon is your preferred online vehicle of your choosing, you can leave a 5-star review. One of the many ways that you can pledge your support for Julie to let her know that she's doing wonderful and much needed work for children, parents, families, educators, and those who love great children's books. And of course, you can also make that healthy and empowering suggestion to your local library or your favorite children's or independent bookstore. If they do not have their copy of Which Would You Choose, you can make that polite recommendation and say, hey, you know what? I actually learned more about Which Would You Choose as part of episode number 25 of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast at PR from the Heart with John Masiulionis, David Newell, and Little Forrest. I recommend that this book should be in stock in your, insert your library name here, insert your local children's bookstore, your local independent bookstore in the process. So the trolley is going to be racking up more miles. So again, we went from San Diego to Pittsburgh to Virginia, and then we head out to the beautiful Pacific Northwest, David, I'm trying to even really many people will refer to this as almost like a little slice of heaven almost. The Pacific Northwest in Oregon, in Corvallis, Oregon to be precise. One of the top award-winning and best-selling children's authors and illustrators that we've had the opportunities to support here to start off 2023 is Katherine Roy. She has released her brand new children's book, Making More, How Life Begins, published by her friends and neighbors at Norton Young Readers. And this is a book, David, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but actually this is something that Katherine has been working on for years. She really classifies this as her baby in many respects. Now, again, she's been in the industry for a long period of time, but this is a book, there's really, when it comes to the topic of reproduction, it's a very, many people say, well, I don't feel comfortable talking about it. How do you necessarily have the talk with your child? And little ones, when they go to the zoo or when they go outdoors and they see butterflies or they see deer and they see the little baby deer, it's that automatic curiosity question, mommy, how did that baby deer come to be, right? And so Katherine was very motivated and inspired to be able to share something that really helped parents and children bridge that conversation, to be a jump starter for this conversation, while also helping kids to connect with the beautiful environment in which we live. Of course, literally, sooner than we realize it, it's going to be Earth Day. That's in April. That's just one of the many days during the year where we can really celebrate and say, wow, look at the fish and look at the deer and look at the oceans. There's so much connectivity. And I think I'm not sure. I think you're a Disney buff, if I'm not mistaken, in some way, shape, or form, David, as I. It goes back to that touching song that Elton John sang in The Lion King. It's the circle of life.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And this is just, again, I'm blown away by the way in which Katherine is sharing this message in a very childlike way that little ones will be able to understand. And again, it really debunks and demystifies that whole, how do I start that kind of conversation with my child as well. So begin to take us inside the pages of Making More, How Life Begins.
Well, let's see. I started with the preface of the book, and it explains that from fish to mammals and plants to insects, every organism on Earth must reproduce. And the survival of each species and of life itself depends on this and the diversity it creates. That's right from the preface, and it really sets up the rest of the book. Oh, Catherine has created a wonderful book. And again, as the preface states, the science of reproduction. She does it in the simplest way. And I think it's simple, but it's complex. If that makes any sense to you.
It is. It's very simple, but it has a lot of depth to it at the same time.
It does, yes. And detail, too, about each organism. Well, let me see. The description that I just said is from the preface. And I couldn't think of any other way of describing the book than what I just said. She said it best in the preface, and I was racking over, how do I take this and put it into my words? And I couldn't. She did it best or the I don't know if she wrote the preface, but maybe the editor wrote the preface. I think she did. But whoever wrote it, it's an excellent description of what's coming up in the book. The inspiration, this is also in the preface. She visited school. She had another book, How to Be an Elephant. That was a previous book of hers. And she was in a classroom and talking about that book. And many of the students raised their hands and asked how a baby elephant gets out of its mom. And, just as you were saying, that's a curiosity, and that's a logical question. How does a baby elephant get out of its mom? And the children are growing and they're maturing, and they're wondering. And she said that these questions were coming up all the time, and Catherine was surprised that they didn't know this basic information of how life begins or where they came from. And Making More, How Life Begins is the actual title of the book. Making More Generations, How Life Begins. Because, and I'm taking this for the preface too, was written because Catherine wanted parents to have a tool that cut through the taboos and answered questions while meeting children's curiosity. Making More, How Life Begins. And that's how the book begins. And she dedicated the book to Jackson and Tristan, her children, 2 boys. Oh, and you mentioned earlier, each page is illustrated by spectacular drawings. Mm-hmm. Oh, and each illustration is so vivid that it just looks like the drawings in itself is a lesson in art and in nature. And it turns out that Katherine Roy is also the illustrator. And back to your comment about it took her a while to write the book, I remember somewhere reading that it took her about 10 years. And at the same time, her husband was helping taking care of the children as she was going about writing the text and drawing the illustrations. And they're lovely illustrations, very colorful. Okay, so the books begin with some text that explains that all around you, life is making more. Birds, fish, flowers. And she explains to the reader that, like oxygen and sunlight, reproduction is essential for life on the earth. Now, I think that could be interpreted by a parent or teacher, depending on the age of the child. And there's a page there's a drawing of 2 snakes, along with the explanation that making more looks different from species to species. Mm-hmm. But the pattern is the same. And here's the pattern: meet, merge, and create something new. And most life comes from the cycle. And that's another lesson, sort of in a sentence. And she writes that making more is the story of families and of births and beginnings. And then on the next page, this question is presented. But how does life make more? and she answers the question. It begins with instruction from the inside of cells known as genes. Now we're getting into more technical things than the rest of the book, and it's really hard to explain all that. We'd be here for hours explaining the biological aspects, but it would take a long time to explain. But the explanations do contain mentions of DNA, egg cells, and sperm of various animals, ranging from deer and turtles and hummingbirds. And each of the processes are explained in detail. Oh, but I think teachers and parents would know best if their students are able to understand all or just some of the explanations. In other words, that it could be a preschooler, maybe an older preschooler, could maybe appreciate the animals and the colors, and there may be some beginnings you can start. It depends on your child. You have to know the child. Each child is not ready exactly at the same time to take on all these the reproduction of life. And they might not know, the preschoolers might not comprehend all the explanations on biology and the mating rituals and so forth, but they would understand and be introduced to the concept of making more, the ongoing process of reproduction of life. And again, I think it would be an excellent book for teachers to use in elementary education. It would be wonderful. Look what it covers.
Well, even
reproduction.
Just briefly speaking to that point, especially over the course of the past several years, educators are, whether it be because of rules and regulations and the way and where they live, and obviously in the state of Florida, there's a lot of interesting things happening with banning of books and different things that you can talk about certain reproductive things and you can't. This is something that's very, I think I communicated this before, but it really, any sort of weird energy surrounding the subject, it really helps kids to connect with this subject through nature. So right. Again, if there's an educator wondering, how do I start this conversation? Parents, how do I start this conversation? And it's a matter of, let's say that, you live near where there's deer regularly. And it can be a little sit-down conversation, depending upon how, the mom or the dad or the educator wants to start this up. You see mama deer over there, and you see papa deer and baby deer. And then it kind of like, that's that soft way to kind of bridge into the subject deeper. But one of the other things I know that you're already starting to talk about is that this is also a very scientific book. So right now I'm looking at the passage that says made to move, and it has the hummingbird sperm cell on there, and it has the different, the male pine cones, and, different sorts of statistics and things along the lines of that. So if there's little ones who really enjoy nature, really little ones who enjoy science, there's different facets. And as we mentioned, there's depth to this book. So there's different ways in which you can connect to the story that is Making More How Life Begins.
Oh, that's so true. I as I was reading through it, I said, boy, there's many levels of this book, levels that would speak to a younger child, to speak to a middle, and speak to adults for that matter. For instance, I made a note of it here. Oh, yes. I never realized that reptiles and birds spend most of their lives on land. Well, I did realize that, but they begin their life in water. I never knew that. The page is entitled Pond for What? And Katherine explains that instead of starting in an open stream, reptiles, for instance, are kept in shells, which are a tiny pod for one. And I think that pod, I don't know the process or how long it takes, but eventually there's a illustration in the book of reptiles breaking through that pod into the water, and eventually I guess they find themselves on land, and that's where they spend their life. But I never knew that happened, and there are descriptions like this in the book, and that's more of a nature story, but it has biology, and it has reproduction, all supporting it. And there are clear descriptions in the process of making more. Each page, and I wrote this down, can be savored by the reader with exquisite details of the creation of various forms of life, as snakes, birds, squirrels, plants, rabbits. Each species have a clear description of the process of making more. There's the species of the snakes, for instance, and how they make more, and there's a description of the rabbits and how they make more. And you could take a page a night, for instance. You could spend, as a parent, I could see me explaining just the page on the turtles, for instance, and that process. There's so much in the page, and it's very well thought out and very well written and researched. I didn't know a lot of this, so I thank Katherine. And towards the end of the book, it states that even after this incredible process of meeting, merging, and building new bodies, many parents, animal parents, have so many offspring that they're unable to take care of them all, and some of them don't make it. Only a tiny portion of seeds grow, and the babies born will survive. There are predators who are lingering about to have a meal, but some do grow up and they have babies of their own, and there you go. There's the making more, the cycle.
Yeah.
And and there's some other pages that deal with cloning and crossing. The way I understand, crossing begins with two sets of butterflies genes, for instance, that makes an offspring a little different than its parents. And again, crossing, and this you have to read more in depth in the book, crossing makes it possible for a species to adapt to an ever-changing world. So there's many layers in this book of reproduction. It's not just simply reproduction and on and on and on. They all look the same forever. The crossing, and again, I wish I could explain that better, but if you get the book, Katherine explains it much better than I can, and in a very intriguing way. Mm-hmm. Do you have any other thoughts or questions? I have a few more thoughts.
So within the contents of when Katherine really dives deeper into the different kinds of species and what this basically looks like, because as you said, David, making more looks different in the life and the world of rabbits than it is in the world of deer, for example. But I love how in between those pages, there is some beautiful artwork. There's a beautiful spread of frogs, I believe, that are swimming in the water. And my favorite passage is actually towards the end of the story. So it's this beautiful ocean shot, and you see ducks and you see turtles and you see fish and what looks like Katherine and her family walking on a bridge. So they're passing by the ocean life, and the ocean life is looking up at Katherine and her family. And it says, making more connects all species and shapes the species yet to be. From common genes come new beginnings, different than what came before. And then it basically continues on. And then towards the end of the story, we'll leave this as a little surprise. At the very end of the story, there is a little bit of a surprise, an adventure for the little ones to be able to enjoy at the very end. So we'll leave that as a little bit of a cliffhanger, so to speak.
So we won't give that away. I had it here, but I think I will keep it to myself. They'll have to go and find Katherine's book to what do they call that now? There's a name, a spoiler. We won't be a spoiler, right?
Yes. We're not going to give away any spoilers here on episode number 25 of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. Also, a few other brief things to mention. Again, we talk about this as being a great educational resource. At the back of the book, there's a list of definitions.
Yes.
So everything ranging from amniotic egg all the way to zygote. So again, like I can remember when I was first learning about, this, whether it be in, a little bit more in depth in, in high school, but everything from, the definition of evolution to the definition of fertilization, the definition of DNA, the definition of pollen, the definition of reproduction. So again, I remember growing up when I was in school, and there were times we had to memorize things. We had to memorize definitions of certain things. There's also a list of species in the book in order of appearance. So ranging from the American robin all the way to the Steller's jay. So maybe if you go through the book the first time and you're like, wow, there's a lot of animals and I'm not necessarily sure what this animal is or what this animal is, you can do your part to teach your little one and say, this is the painted turtle. And so they can learn along the way. It's kind of like, for example, when you go to your local zoo and, your little boy, your little girl will say, mommy, daddy, what's that animal right over there? So you can kind of have your own almost like experience with that while reading the book once you get to the very end. And then also at the very end, Katherine has a passage that's entitled, What's in Your Backyard? And I will mention this briefly. It says, I wrote and drew this book about a few of the species that live in my backyard and neighborhood, but the wildlife in your habitat might be completely different. Use your senses and search for clues about which plants and animals are making more near you. Look high, look low, listen carefully, and follow your nose. Can you find any of the following things at your school, in a nearby park, or in your backyard? Take notes or make a drawing to start a field journal of what you discover. So I love at the end of the story, technically after the story concludes, how she's already inviting. Again, it's the invitation that we talked about.
Yes.
It's an invitation to continue to keep the message going even after the book is complete. So for example, when I lived in Buffalo, there's different kinds of animals that are more prevalent out in Buffalo. In San Diego, there's different kinds of animals that are out here as well too. So Katherine's doing her part to be able to make this a personalized adventure for little ones, no matter wherever they live, whether it be in the United States, whether they live abroad. If you live out in nature, you're going to be seeing different kinds of animals that you normally don't see than maybe, let's say, if you live within the city as well too. And then I think just the other thing to mention is that at the very end, there's also there's a full one-page spread that's a note from the author. And Katherine really, again, shares this a little bit deeper in terms of how the book was conceived and a little bit more about her thoughts about reproduction. She's vested into this, David. And one of the things that's really great about this book is that, oftentimes, especially if, let's say, you're working with a publisher and they can come to you with an idea and say, what books are selling great? Books about, dogs, right? Let's write a book about a dog. And the author could be like, not necessarily so sure about that. I'm more of a cat person on mine of things. Now, I'm obviously a dog person on mine of things with just full transparency. But this is something that Katherine has spent years on, and maybe in many respects for her, it's maybe felt like multiple lifetimes, so to speak. So this really goes back to really how there's a common thread as we begin to wind down our time here on the March edition of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, because of course, when we hear the trolley, that's a little cue that means it's time to wrap up and it's time to go. But again, this particular book has a linking thread with which would you choose, because it's a matter of, if you're inspired to do something, and again, it could seem new, it is new, but it could seem scary. To go back to that first passage, the scary but new opportunity, right? Katherine, this is a book that she's wanted to write and illustrate for a long period of time, and she trusted her emotions, her feelings. She followed her heart in the process, and this was actually voted by Kirkus, which is, again, there's the Neighborly Reviews, and then you have your Kirkus and your New York Times, but Kirkus actually voted Making More How Life Begins is one of the best books for the month of March, and that covers a lot of ground, a lot of books. But again, going back to the theme of raising conscious children, right? We can do our part as parents and caregivers and grandparents and educators to really help little ones know that none of this has to, that fear is something we can buy into. But if you really do your part to help the little one in your life to connect with more of the energies of love and confidence and excitement and curiosity, life really can be this most excellent adventure.
Yeah, that's right. But it doesn't come magically. I think you work at it every day to, and that I think is an important factor too. But you have to start somewhere, and I think both authors have done an excellent job on the subject they've chosen. And just a little aside, as I was sitting yesterday, I was reading through the notes and the books, and we live in sort of a suburban area of Pittsburgh, and I glanced out our back window that looks on our lawn, and lo and behold, there were 6 deer grazing. 6 deer, some adults and some little ones. And I thought, how appropriate is that? I'm working and reading something on reproduction, and there right in front of me were 6 deer. And then I looked over a little further, and there was our fish pond. And a little quick story, and then we have to wrap this up. Every spring, we hear chirping and chirping and chirping, and it's the frogs in our fish pond who are mating, and there are at least 1,000 little tadpoles swimming in the pond. I think the fish have a field day, but some of those, going back to the story, some of those frogs, tadpoles, make it out of the pond and go on to produce new life. The circle keeps going, like the trolley wheels.
Yes, the circle of life, the cycle of life. And of course, little Forrest also gives 2 paws up for Making More How Life Begins. You can, of course, we invite you, if you have just loved the little small sampling of Making More How Life Begins, if you want to be able to pledge your support for Katherine, you can purchase your copy of Making More How Life Begins. You can head on over to her official website. You can head on over to Amazon.com if that's your preferred online vehicle of your choosing. You can leave a 5-star review. One of the many ways you can pledge your support, in addition to purchasing your copy of Making More How Life Begins, is by leaving a 5-star review on Amazon to let Katherine and the team at Norton Young Readers know that they are doing wonderful and much needed work for children, parents, families, educators, and those who love great children's books. And yes, Making More How Life Begins is available at bookstores nationwide. Indeed, you can also head on over to your favorite local library or your favorite children's or independent bookstore. And if it is there, feel free to purchase a copy. If it's not there, then most importantly, especially your local library, remember that you can make that polite recommendation and say that you learned about Katherine Roy's Making More in episode number 25 of Pierre from the Heart's Neighborly Reviews Bookcast with John Masiulionis and David Newell and Little Forrest. I feel this is a great subject matter that definitely needs to be in your library. So again, if your little one wants to learn more about connecting with different kinds of animals, to be able to connect with our ecosystem, the environment, or simply to be able to, again, have that essential conversation starter between, if you're a parent or if you're an educator, the little one in your life, this is the perfect bridge to be able to do just that. And again, together, as part of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, we're doing our part to provide resources of care to help you, if you're a parent, a caregiver, a grandparent, an educator, to raise the conscious child or children that are in your life. Raise your hand if you have had fun on episode number 25 of PR from the Heart's Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. Well, this little guy is kind of starting to sleep, so I have to hold him up. He's like, yay, I had fun, but I'm also tired at the same point in time. So Again, if these messages, because we have shared several messages, many messages, in fact, as part of episode number 25 of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, if you have enjoyed this magical trolley stop, if these messages have lifted your spirits, if they have brought some love and joy and healing into your heart, if anything, you say, you know what, I learned a few things today that necessarily I didn't know previously leading into this bookcast. We encourage you, if you haven't had the opportunities to do so, to subscribe to PR from the Heart's official YouTube channel and to share this very special trolley stop that you have been enjoying. That is episode number 25 of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. Again, that's one of the many ways you can pledge your support for us here at PR from the Heart and for the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. And again, there are dozens of children's books that are available at your fingertips if you are looking for more dedicated resources of care for the child, the little one in your life, or if simply you're an adult and you love children's books as well. Perhaps maybe you're getting ready to become a parent at some point in time and getting that library together, so to speak. You can check out any of our previous 24 episodes of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, which again are now available on PR from the Heart's official YouTube channel, at PR from the Heart, and our official website, prfromtheheart.com. As we wind down, we are super excited because just in a few days, the trolley will head literally, not just, in this metaphorical sense, but the trolley is going to be heading from San Diego to Pittsburgh. Little Forrest will not be joining us, however. That's okay. He's going to be enjoying time with his pet sitter. But David and I are going to be reconnecting. The next 2 episodes of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast that you are going to be seeing are going to be at the brand new studios at the Center for Media Innovation in downtown Pittsburgh. So episode number 26 and episode number 27, the April and May 2023 episodes of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, we will be connecting with all of you together. David and I will be, we're just super excited. There's so many wonderful books and so many wonderful authors and illustrators as well too that will be joining us in studio, so we encourage you to stay tuned for that as well. If you are a children's author or a children's illustrator and would love to have David and I review your brand new children's book, to be able to deliver a heartfelt review of your brand new children's book throughout the the latter half of 2023, because sooner than we realize it, the summer's just around the corner, then there's the back to school season, and then there's the holiday season, then it all starts up all over again. We encourage you to head on over to our official website, prfromtheheart.com, or you can connect with us via any of our social media platforms at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all at PR from the Heart. And we look forward to seeing how we can indeed do our part to share a special heartfelt neighborly review of your brand new children's book as well. If you are a children's or middle grade author and would love to learn how we can be of service to you at PR from the Heart, if you're interested in facilitating a featured television interview or interviews in a city of your choosing, or a full book media tour in the process, you can also head on over to our official website at prfromtheheart.com and schedule your courtesy connection call. Let us see how we can be of service to you. One final time, we encourage you to enjoy fully Which Would You Choose, written by Julie Deanne, and Making More, How Life Begins, written and illustrated by the award-winning and best-selling Katherine Roy, published by Norton Young Readers. Making More, How Life Begins. Both books are now available. Again, if Amazon is your preferred online vehicle of your choosing, you can leave 5-star reviews if you feel guided to do so, both with Which Would You Choose and Making More, How Life Begins. One of the many ways you can pledge your support for Julie and for Katherine, to let them know that they are doing essential work, much needed work for children, parents, families, educators, and those who love great children's books. This has been such a magical trolley stop. As we mentioned, there are many more magical trolley stops to come. We look forward to seeing all of you over the course of these next couple of months from the Center for Media Innovation in downtown Pittsburgh. But of course, we always close out each Neighborly Reviews Bookcast episode with a little tip of the cap to our favorite neighbor, Mr. Rogers. David spent many a years, many a decades with Mr. Rogers, and he reminded us in his own way, shape, and form. And as I always like to say, David, I think that in a past life, Mr. Rogers met Ponce de Leon, that he found the fountain of youth, because somehow Mr. Rogers weighed 143 pounds for his entire natural adult life. Maybe it was because he did the swimming of the laps every day. Maybe he knew something that we didn't necessarily, but I think he did because there's 1 letter in I, 4 letters in love, and 3 letters in you. That was his way of reminding us, and he did this in different ways, shapes, and forms through his time in the neighborhood, through various talks, commencement speeches. He was reminding us of our essential worth and value. Since David was kind enough to join us here, as always, each and every month for the past 25 trolley stops, we, of course, are proud to share our favorite 3 numbers that are 2, 4, 3. There's 2 letters in we, 4 letters in love, 3 letters in you. That is our reminder that we see you. We see your worth and your value, that you are loved, you are whole, you are healthy, you are complete, that you are loved, that you are special, just the way that you are. And also, we appreciate you pledging your support for our friends and neighbors at Reading is Fundamental Pittsburgh, which again is the Pittsburgh chapter of the National Non-for-Profit Children's Literacy Organization that provides children's books, developmental resources, and really just the connection of life, a lifelong love of reading to children that come from low-income families. In Pittsburgh last year alone, they gave over 100,000 children's books to over 23,000 children in need. So we are proud to be able to pledge our support each and every month here through the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast to Reading is Fundamental Pittsburgh. If you feel guided to do so, pledge your support as well with a contribution financially if you feel that you were able to. No donation is too large, no donation is too small. rifpittsburgh.org/donate. Again, we've included that in the description below. So, little Forrest, do you want to say goodbye to David? I know that you won't be seeing him for a couple trolley stops, but I'm sure that we'll be checking in with him along the way. We hope that you have enjoyed episode number 25 of the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast. So thank you for your continued support of PR from the Heart, for the Neighborly Reviews Bookcast, for your continued support of children's authors and illustrators like Julie and like Katherine, who again are doing wonderful and much needed work for children, parents, families, educators, and those who love great children's books, for truly the pillars of our community, local libraries, children's and independent bookstores. And of course, above all else, we want to thank you for helping us to walk home, the children of the world, our fellow friends, our fellow neighbors, and our fellow shining stars. Goodbye for now. You want to wave
goodbye?
Yay! Episode number 25 is complete. Bye-bye. Yay!